Hello, today I've got a pretty exciting thing to share with you. I've partnered up with Magnum Photos to give you an exclusive look at a new online learning course with one of my favourite photographers, Alec Soth. It's got 19 lessons and spans over 5 hours long, and it's all about the photographic process and telling stories through photography. And there's a good amount of behind the scenes of him actually shooting too. And I have to say, after watching this, nothing has ever made me so compelled to want to go out and make some personal photos. So they've given me some of the footage from the course, which is going to play now for the rest of the video. And if you're interested in seeing the rest, you can purchase the course through the link in the description. And what's really great is I get a kickback from everyone that purchases it, so definitely please use the link that's provided. And hopefully you enjoy this as much as I did.
From really early on, I defined my own identity as an artist. This was before photography. My mom asked me, "What do you want to do with your life?" And I said, "It's not to be happy," which is kind of crazy. It was like, I want to make something great. My background as a photographer actually started as an artist, and I did these kind of like sculptures in my bedroom, and I would go outside into the woods and walk around and wander and build things, forts. I was kind of a shy kid, lived a little bit outside the suburbs, and had this real imaginary world that I created. I think this is an important part of my background as a photographer, that I'm someone who has this internal life that I seek to represent in the external world. I like this act of discovery. I like to go out and wander and discover something. But for me, I can't just wander aimlessly. I need a destination. In the beginning, we started with a really random exercise, throwing a dart at the map, and that tells me where to go. Once I have that little piece of information, then I can kind of research and brainstorm and find new avenues to go down. In the case of this day, the arrow landed on White Bear Lake. White Bear Lake is a destination for, boaters and fisher people and all of that. And I've been thinking about the way that fishing is analogous to photography. So I thought, that might be an interesting avenue to go down. So I did some searching for like bait and tackle shops. And one thing led to another, and I found this guy, the Grizz. And he had an interesting look about him, and it also said he was nominated for the Fishing Hall of Fame, or he was the Fisherman of the Year in 2007. And I thought, this is a guy I want to meet. Where do you clean the fish?
Right here.
Right here?
Yeah, right here. I set up a cooler. I sit down on a bucket and...
Do you mind setting up? I am not the kind of photographer that photographs everything as it is. So he was about to sit down and for his morning routine of cleaning the fish, but he was going to do it in harsh lighting. I have no problem saying, let's move things around a little bit. Let's go inside the garage. Let's try it there. When I set up the camera, I might need to be like right about here. How hard is it to move this thing? We went in the garage and he laid out his table and the place that he likes to sit, his little cleaning setup. And I loved this because there was like this almost ritual to it, and it allowed me to have my space across from him where I'm set up. Just trying to figure out the the lighting and also what sort of depth of field that I want. You know, part of the pleasure of this process is lack of depth of field, so it really pulls him out. And I'm really happy having that background information with that red dustpan and those yellow objects out of focus. It's a medium length exposure, but it's risky to do it on the fly when he's moving. So most likely this is going to be a pose portrait. The thing I'm trying to figure out is, I kind of like how he's leaned over like this, and then he could look up, or does he sit up? And so those are the kind of the two positions I'm going with. But this, there's such a beautiful formality to this triangular shape with the bag and the two barrels, and so compositionally it's like super frontal, super composed, which is kind of the nature of working this way. This is kind of my favorite portrait scenario, is when the subject is in their world and I'm in my little world, and I get to just watch another human being and look at them, look at their features, watch their hands working. This I love. Hold that. Right in the lens. Done. You can keep going. I watched him clean the fish. There was kind of a still life situation that he set up that had its own beauty. The whole time I was thinking, I want to get in the house. This is always a motivation for me. I often think back when I was just first interested in photography. I had a job delivering Chinese food, and you go up to the door, they crack open the door to give you the money, and you look inside their little world. This for me is so exciting. And photography is this excuse to work your way in. Down in the basement, there was all this paraphernalia from a life in fishing. And then I have to quickly calculate what pictures I'm going to take. The thing that I've learned from years of photography is that it generally doesn't work to have tons of information in a picture. When I first started in photography, I tended to crowd the frame. I would make a portrait, and I would make sure there was lots of stuff to look at inside of it. And in fact, over time I learned that took away from some of the power. Sometimes you just want to look at the simple thing itself. For me, what was kind of interesting about this whole experience was making an analogy between photography and fishing. What do you choose after catching thousands and thousands of fish to hang on your wall? What do I choose as a photographer after taking thousands and thousands of pictures to print and put in a book or put in an exhibition? What's valuable? Why one over another? And so this is the stuff that was in my mind while I was down there. You know, a big part of the thrill of shooting film instead of digital is this moment too. It's, you know, I made the pictures here, unloaded them in a tent, sent them to New York, they got processed, contact sheets, they get sent back in a box. And so there's this kind of like drama that builds up when you open the film. Here's the grizz. This is interesting because I actually like it much more seeing it this way than I did through the camera. The fish are more present than I thought they were going to be. I wasn't really aware of what was happening over here. These are the sports listings. This was a picture that I couldn't decide. He changed the newspaper at one point, and you had this backdrop of the farewell to John McCain. And so McCain is dead and we have a dead fish. And is that stupid? Is that heavy-handed? Maybe, and for sure in the digital picture it was, but it's a little more subtle in this case. It's also a picture that will change with time. So as years passed and McCain's death means something else, it'll have a different flavor. And it's also the extent to which this is present in the picture. And what I really like are these guts in the picture. And when I was taking this, there was an object right here, which at the last second before I clicked the shutter, I took it away. I do like that. I like this wet stain. I spent a fair amount of time with the grizz, maybe a couple of hours, but I'm not the kind of photographer that spends days with people or weeks with people or moves in with them. I totally admire that kind of photography, but it's not my ambition. My ambition is sort of to flow through the world, connecting the dots, moving from one place to the next. I thought I could spend more time with the grizz. We could go out in a lake. I was interested in him as a character, but I was more interested in this metaphor of fishing and where this experience was going to take me beyond him. And it was also just time for a break. I need moments to pause and to process everything. A fascinating thing about the Mississippi River is that it exists in the imagination of so many people. That's kind of why I liked it. It's iconic, but you don't think of a photograph necessarily. You think of an idea. You think of freedom. For me, it was a feeling of longing. A longing for adventure, for travel, a longing also for solitude. And I like that this notion of mine existed outside of an image, so that I didn't have to live up to any one particular picture of the river. Sleeping by the Mississippi is my first published project, and it of course is photographs along the Mississippi River, but it is not photographs necessarily of the Mississippi River. The idea of the project was to use the river as a metaphor for wandering, essentially. The photographs start in Minnesota, and I always made the pictures in the wintertime or springtime, so it's cold up north. And then as you go south, it gets warmer and warmer. The Mississippi River, for those that don't know, runs the full length of the US from Minnesota all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. When I made my first trip along the Mississippi River, I drove west from the Twin Cities, and I hit the river at one point, and I had this realization that I could go right or I could go left, and I could go on one side of the river or the other side of the river. And it was like all the possibilities were there. It was just complete openness, this feeling of total freedom, and that this was exactly what I wanted to do. It was really an incredible moment. What I loved about the river is that it provided me with a path. So when I went out each day, I had something to follow. But then I could use that path however I wanted, and I could use the river as a metaphor however I wanted. I really was just using the river as a way to talk about freedom, but in a sort of, in like a boyish, I want to go rafting down the river sort of a way. Huckleberry Finn, the great novel by Mark Twain, you have this boy going down a raft down the river, and that represents the kind of freedom I was thinking about. But then there's another character, Jim the slave, who is seeking freedom up the river. And this was this dualistic part of the project as I pursued it as well. It was my own fantasies, but also I was encountering other people's lives, people who wanted freedom in different sort of ways. One of the key challenges of any project is thinking about how the pictures are going to work together. One thing that was a little bit different about Sleeping by the Mississippi as a project is that I stopped caring. I had decided at that point that I wasn't going to be a famous photographer, and only so much was going to happen with this work. I should say that this was a unique time in my life in which I had the skills, but I didn't have the audience. So no one really cared what I was doing, so I felt really free. Things kind of changed later. And I think, one thing that's really different is if, for example, you're in school, you're going to grad school, you got to show your work to class every week. That really changes the way you think about things. And this was this little window of time for me where I wasn't worried about that, but at the same time I felt like I kind of knew what I was doing. So I just thought, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to take the pictures I want to take. And if they fit, they fit. If they don't, they don't. And so I did that. When I was making the work, I felt so lucky. I almost never got turned down for a picture. And, whatever door I knocked on seemed to be opened up for me, and I was invited inside. I've never had this kind of luck ever since. It was also just a magical time in my life because I felt like I had the skills and now I had the opportunity. That said, I look back at the work and I see all sorts of problems now. I see pictures that I wouldn't include if I were to do it now. I see sort of naive mistakes. But one thing I've thought about a lot is the extent to which that naivete is a part of its charm, I guess. There's a reason I think that so many artists in whatever medium, that early work has this kind of energy. But that energy is a mix of just getting enough skill and this freshness and newness and naivete.